Well, now I want to introduce Steve Sherrill. What do you want to talk about, Steve?
Well, thank you, Jim. Tonight we're going to talk about safety and modeling. We use a lot of tools that will actually hurt us. I'm sure many of us have had cuts, bruises, things like this. We use blade cutting tools. We use hobby knives. We use Dremel motor tools with cutoff wheels. We use saws, soldering irons, paint strippers, scissors, um, glues, choppers, things like this. Do we always put on our masks? Do we always have a proper blade disposal? Do we have safety glasses, which are very important, probably the most important thing you can use? And of course, do we have a fire extinguisher in case things really get bad? And do we have, of course, Band-Aids? I think some of this actually begins when we design our workshop. Now, Greg Cassidy just designed a new work area, and I've asked him to put a couple of pictures up, and then we're going to go into maybe some 3D printing safety. I've asked Bob Gelmacher to do a little bit on that. So, Greg, if you'll put that up, are you still there?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this is what I started with when I was first setting up a shop in my basement. And we have a poured concrete basement, and the walkout portion of it, they'd put up a lot of insulation on the wall. And I had my workshop set up, but it wasn't very appealing. I didn't have enough space. I couldn't put stuff on the wall in front of me. I moved everything out of the way, put up some strand board. I had help with some people who were doing some other work on our house when we were having the kitchen done. Then I went ahead and painted it, put my shelving up, so I finally had enough storage. Got my workbench back in place. And now I have a nice bright area with plenty of storage, so I don't have stuff stacked on top of boxes, and it's a lot easier to see stuff.
The lighting was important aspect of redesign, wasn't it? So you had plenty of light on your subject you were modeling.
Absolutely, because the other walls, that insulation and the dark, the backside of the wall that we had used when we finished the basement just sucked up all the light.
Do you keep the covers on your X-Acto knives, or are they just turned upside down?
I actually keep them in that little holder that you see right here. I have a piece of foam on the bottom of that, so I stick them in with the point down, and I've never really had a problem with that. Now, I do have scalpels, and you can see those right there. Those are held by magnets, so that those points never touch anything.
All right. Do you have a fire extinguisher?
No, I don't. I have one upstairs, but I don't have one down here. And when you mentioned that, I thought to myself, I don't have one down there. I do have a smoke detector down there, but not a fire extinguisher.
Okay. Where do you do your painting?
Over here to the left, I have another table with a paint booth for my airbrushing, and it has a hose that vents outside. If I'm using rattle cans, I'll typically take it out back unless it's the dread of winter and I really have to paint something.
Okay. You keep your Band-Aids handy? Safety glasses?
I do have masking tape, which I have used when I've cut myself.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice looking work area there.
Yeah, and I do have a mask and a set of glasses over at the spray booth. Depending on what I'm spraying. If I'm spraying an acrylic, I tend not to use them because it vents pretty well. But if I'm spraying a solvent, then I will put the mask on.
How do you dispose of your cutting blades?
Aha. Do you see this little can right here? It's actually the end of an international coffee can. I have a slit in the top of it, and all my blades go into that.
Okay.
And I've been filling it up for the last, I guess, 6 years, and it's just about to get full.
Wow. Wow. You're doing a lot of safe things there. Now, we also have 3D printing. And Bob Gelmacher, let me ask you a few questions. Bob,
Yep.
I know you're doing a lot of 3D printing, and the more you print, the more you have found out there are certain safety things that you need to be doing during the printing process that maybe you didn't do in the beginning. You want to share some of that with us?
Yeah, what I found is that the especially with the resin printers is when you first get into resin printing and you look at all the YouTubes that are out there, they always talk about wearing some kind of ventilation mask and also gloves and everything. And of course, I didn't want to pay any attention to any of that. And I found that that was a real mistake. Not so much from the ventilation standpoint, because the printers that I have built-in charcoal filters. So I'm not getting that kind of smell or anything in the air, but I did find out that if you get the resin on your hands, and especially in the post process where you're washing these resin prints in alcohol, is that too much exposure to alcohol, at least for me, actually blistered my hands. And it took a couple of trips to a dermatologist in order to get that all squared away. So I really am a firm believer in wearing gloves. So whenever I'm back in the room where I do my resin printing, I always am wearing gloves no matter what I'm doing back there, just because I know what kind of damage I could do to my hands. Now, I will add too that when I had that problem with the resin with the alcohol in my hands, I wasn't as careful as I could have been when I went to the bathroom. Consequently, some of that alcohol and some of the resin rubbed off on other parts, and I had to discuss that with my female uh, dermatologist, which we got through it, but it was embarrassing. The other thing, and not so much with the resin printing, but with the uh, filament printers, and that's laying down a bead of plastic through something similar to a hot glue gun, is that the tip of that nozzle gets very, very hot. And I have a tendency sometimes to kind of pull off strings off of that nozzle, and you just have to be really careful because you can burn yourself. And the other thing is that, um, when you're scratch building, you're right there. You got to be there with the materials. When we're doing a lot of other things with our model railroading, you got to be right there. But what I found is that because many times in printing, it could take 4, 6, 10 hours to complete a print. You get kind of lazy and you say, well, I'll go to bed and I'll pick it up in the morning. Well, uh, it's not so much the safety for you, but it's the safety for your equipment. Because if something goes really bad about an hour into a 10-hour print, you can do some real damage to your equipment. A couple other things that I was listening to Greg, and is I've converted almost everything in my shop to LED lights. And that really, number one, it's probably cheaper to run. Number two, it's a lot cooler. But number three, it gives me a lot more light. And the other thing, and I found this the hard way, is hot glue guns. If you're not careful with those things, they can be real dangerous. And I burned myself really severely with a hot glue gun about a day after I had this new one. And that took another couple trips to the doctors. But anyway, safety has to play into all of this, no matter what tool that you're using.
One other
Bob,
thing
when
that
you
I
talk
go ahead.
Bob, when you
Go ahead.
talk about wearing gloves,
Uh,
are there any special gloves that you wear? What kind of gloves are you talking about?
well, it's basically exam gloves, and they recommend nitrile. And I've tried both latex rubber gloves and the nitrile gloves, and uh, I'm not allergic to latex, so I can wear both, and they both seem to do the job pretty well. But I do have to be careful sometimes because I might try to reuse a pair of gloves multiple times. And every once in a while, let's say a thumb or a finger will break off of those, and all of a sudden I'm finding out that I've got this big hole of alcohol pouring through. But the two types that I use are latex and the nitro.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve,
Yes, Tom.
I had a kickback on my table saw 2 years ago when I was cutting plywood for my tortoise switches. You know, I have this technique where I basically super glue a piece of roughly 1/4 inch plywood below a turnout, and then I mount it to the foam. And I have the photos. I don't want to gross anybody out, but if you want to see just how bad things can get in model railroading if you're not careful, I'll show you 4 quick slides. I butchered the shit out of my fingers.
Wow.
Oh,
That so
That's a lucky cut, Tom.
Mm.
I've seen much worse.
it was a trip to the emergency room, and I lost that fingernail, and it took a year to come back, and this one healed up pretty fast. But it in a way, I was fortunate. I could have lost a finger, I suppose, but I mean, it can be a dangerous hobby if you're not careful, you know. So anyway,
well, X-Acto knives falling out of your hands onto your thighs or something like that, you know, they will go through your pants,
yeah,
especially.
Well, you know what, Tom, to piggyback on what you were just showing, when I was redoing my workshop, probably the most dangerous thing that I did, and is probably the most dangerous thing I've done in the last 6 months, was the shelves. I had to rip them down from 11 inches to 8 inches. I took my my little workmate out back. I clamped the shelves to the workmate. I drew my line. I got my circular saw, which is the only one I have, and I put on my eye protection, and I made sure there was nothing around me, and I went ahead and ripped those 2 shelves, and everything went fine. But the reason it was dangerous is because I don't do it very often. Now, I took a lot of precautions because of that, because it's not something that I'm accustomed to, and nothing went wrong. But still, the sound of that spinning blade,
well,
it puts fear in your heart.
I have used my table saw for probably 35 years, and I've had 2 kickbacks. One, the board hit me right in the belt, you know, right in the stomach, but it didn't do anything. A little lower might have been a little exciting. And then just 2 years ago, ripping these little pieces of plywood, and the problem is they were too small, and they jacked in between the blade and the guide. And
Were you cutting narrow pieces with
Yes.
the rip blade? Yeah, what you got to do, you know, the trick is you got to lock a piece of wood on the rip blade, get the 90-degree slide tool out,
yeah,
and you put the wood up against there, and you set it up so that it comes off of that before it goes into the blade. You hold the position on that, but you set it with the rip blade. But by the time it gets there, you don't have that other blade there. Yeah, you've got to be really careful. Anything you rip's got to be like 4 times the width.
yeah,
Then you're safe. If you get down to where it's narrower, it's the width, the height is narrower than the width with a rip blade, you are just asking for trouble.
yeah, precisely. That's
yeah.
exactly what I did. And I even the kick, I even knew better. Again,
No, I know. It's one of those things you think I can do it expeditiously. I'm really good, but when it catches, there's a lot of energy there. Yeah, no, that's one of those things I've learned. You put in that guide, you know, clamp a piece of board that's 1/2 inch wide onto the rip blade.
I know the
and then-
trick. And
Yeah, exactly.
the piece that damaged my finger, I mean, it's perfectly fine now, but I kept that piece in my truck for 2 years just to remind me how stupid I was.
Tom, I make a lot of my own strip wood out of basswood,
Yeah,
and you know, you get down to like 1/4 by 1/4 inch, and I've had
Yeah.
it spear back at me and actually break the skin. I mean, that could have been really dangerous. But
When you did that, what kind of, using a micro mark table? So you're not using a big bad
now
boy?
I have well, it's an old Sears table saw now, and it
That's-
usually wants
that's
to
what I
take
have.
about 10-inch blades. But I found that by using the 10-inch blades, a lot of times I was turning as much wood into sawdust as I was actually getting a piece of wood that I could use. So I searched it out and I found and I can't remember the name, but it's a red blade and it's only about 7 inches in diameter, but has
So
a
a
really
red devil,
pardon me?
a red devil.
It might be, but it has a very, very fine, thin kerf, and
Yeah.
it's like 60 teeth. And that
Yeah.
gives me a really pretty good cut. But still, I have to be real careful because it'll flip back at me, and it's like a spear.
Yeah, that's what I have, is the old Sears cast iron
Yeah.
table saw, and it's a beast. And again, I've had it for 35 years. I've only had 2 kickbacks, which is 2 kickbacks too many. You know?
I've seen some people, and I think it was at a woodworking show, as it turns out, where his hand was so mangled, and he had all kind of braces on to keep his fingers in place, and it was in the healing process, but it looked terrible. Huh.
Yeah.
Dangerous tool.
Yeah.
Dangerous
Wow.
tool.
Better
Okay,
respect
Jim.
power tools.
Anybody else have anything they want to say or comment?
What's
By,
this?
by,
John.
What's this?
Oh yeah, that's pretty bad.
so let's get away from the grotesque for a moment. So by the way, if you happen to go to a business Costco, the business Costco's sell the food gloves, and they're really thin and fine, but like for painting, they're great because you can use them. If you get paint on them, you just throw them away. You don't have to worry about it. You get 4,000. I think they're boxes of 1,000 each. You get 4 boxes for like $12.
What are
And
they,
you
Phil?
they're called food service gloves. They're the ones they use when you go
Oh.
get them a sandwich made. They put them on just for your sandwich. So you just throw them, but you can use them for everything. I
Yeah.
mean, I use them in the kitchen when I cut a jalapeno, to dice up a jalapeno really fine to put in cream cheese, have a spicy cream cheese. If you get that stuff on your hands and you touch your eyes,
Mm.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
dying. And you put those gloves on the hand that you hold jalapenos with, the knife hand you don't have to worry about, and you don't get to have that problem. So they're great in the kitchen. And like I said, for painting, they're great for painting because you just use them once. And if you get any paint on them or anything, take them off, throw them away, put another pair on.
Just one quick note: never wear gloves when you're using a power tool.
And Tom, it would be a real test of faith. Have you ever seen any of these table saws that they claim you can put a hot dog in it
Yeah.
and it'll stop?
Yeah.
I don't want to try that. I have no faith in those things at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Your
But
hand
it's
is a
a-
hot. Your hand
I
is a
have
hot
s-
dog.
I have seen it, but as long as you're just extremely careful with your
Oh yeah.
old timer table saw, you just like Phil hit it right in the nose. What I did, it's like he was there watching me or something.
We've all done it, but only some of us have major injury or significant injuries because of it. But John showed us it's really easy to, lose your balance, slip, have something happen and have a major issue.
Yeah,
The
that's
worst
right.
thing I've ever had was I had a fairly small drill bit in my hand power drill, and I dropped it and I instinctively tried to do a kick stop with my leg. Well, the drill just kept on going. And it stuck.
Well, Steve mentioned dropping the X-Acto knives. I swear to God, I must drop my X-Acto knife 2 or 3 times a week, and I react and I jump out of the way.
Yeah.
But it's going to stick me one of these times.
You only catch you with your foot once, Tom.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well, you're so used to dropping little parts that you're working on, and you bring your legs together to try and catch it, and
Ooh.
try to remember that. Oh, that's a sharp thing that's coming down. You have to counter the muscle memory.
You know, I think that model maker's apron now has a real appeal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, that's probably not a bad idea.
It isn't a bad idea. You could have something that you just wore and have a little bit of Velcro you could clip up under the workbench and have a nice pocket there to catch everything, make it out of, you know, kind of heavy-ish, cloth.
Watchmakers do it, so you probably get one on
Yeah,
Amazon.
exactly. Probably good. That's
Yeah.
not a
Huh.
bad, that's actually not a bad idea at all if you're kind of sitting at a workbench, because
We
I
were just
drop
talking
stuff all
about
the
one of
time.
those. We were just talking about one of those in our club meeting last night. And the basic problem is 90% of the time, something goes flying in a different direction, a spring or a
Yeah.
piece that you're cutting off, and it'll go that way or that way or that way.
It's
And you're
interesting.
really lucky if it's going to go into your apron.
I'm more concerned with the X-Acto knife nabbing me. I think that's what we were after.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
All the detail parts, all
Oh,
of
yeah.
the detail parts when you drop them have a total disregard for gravity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Every direction but down.
I don't need circumcised again.
All right.
Well, we gotten a little off topic here.
Too much information.
Some
That's all. I think we've covered the subject here pretty well right now. And it's getting kind of late, so let me thank you so much, Steve, for doing that for us this evening. Look forward to seeing what you want to talk about next week.